When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear, each of us in our own native language?" Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs. In our own languages we hear them speaking about God's deeds of power. All were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine."
Good morning, church family. Having spent well over a year looking at the good news of Jesus according to Matthew, that's almost going through events in real time, it still feels strange to be doing anything else. But for the past few weeks, we've been looking at some important things that Matthew didn't dwell on. You could say that this is the aftermath you. A recurring theme of Matthew was Emmanuel, God with us. But last week, Peter explored the ascension of Jesus. Jesus had physically left them. After the wild ride the disciples had been on, they were reeling from Jesus' death and then surprised and amazed by his resurrection. They ask him, "Lord, are you at this time going to restore your kingdom to Israel?" They're expecting this to be the start of the next chapter of their adventure with Jesus. Instead, he tells them that no one can know what and when things will happen. He says, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." So the disciples find themselves again wondering, what's next? Jesus has gone. They probably don't feel like Emmanuel, God is with them, anymore. Now we arrive at Pentecost, which we remember as the time the Holy Spirit came and indwelt the followers of Jesus and stayed. The disciples were gathered together to celebrate a festival that they would have called Shavuot, or the Festival of Weeks. The date of Shavuot is linked to a 7-week period after Passover. The 49th day or the 50th day is Pentecost. It's a combination of a harvest festival and a remembering of the law being given to Moses. There were members of the Jewish community who had scattered and lived throughout the surrounding nations, and they'd all gathered as they would periodically to celebrate special festivals. And that's why there are people from so many nations gathered when the disciples spilled out of their meeting place after the Spirit came. What is Pentecost to us? Of course, we remember it's the time Jesus sent the Holy Spirit to live within his followers. And I would suggest it's the moment that true humanity and true fullness of life was restored. People were always designed to live like this, knowing God in communion with him. From any passage, there's always far more to draw out than we can in a short period of time. But today, we're just going to look at 3 points from the passage. The tongues of fire, the reunification of scattered people, and the fact that they hadn't had too much wine. We read this. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like a blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Despite God's first plan, when he walked with people in the Garden of Eden, humanity's tendency to think that they know better has always caused a rift between us. So often, when we see God's presence in the Old Testament, he is separate. He appeared as a pillar of fire to guide the Israelites at night. He came and dwelt in the tabernacle as they travelled. He made his dwelling place in the temple. But as the Holy Spirit descends, again he is described in terms of fire, echoing his appearance from the travelling Israelites. But at this time, he's not separate from them. He enters the room that they're in. The fire they see separates out, and the Holy Spirit now comes and rests on each of them. The separation is removed, and closeness is restored. God no longer choosing to restrict his presence to the temple, but now setting up camp within each of them. Close, personal. This is quite a change in how God's presence can be known. No longer distant, now close and intimate. Now there were staying in Jerusalem God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment, because each of them heard their own language being spoken. Utterly amazed, they asked, "Aren't all those who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in our own native language? We hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues." Amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, "What does this mean?" Since people first tried to go their own way, God has been working out his plan to overcome the consequences of our disobedience. And when I looked at the gathering of these Jewish folk from far and wide, who came together and all hear the good news of Jesus in their own language, I can't help but see this as a reversal of the scattering that happened at Babel. In Genesis 11, we read, "The whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there." Which sounds reasonable, except that God's instructions were to spread out and repopulate the earth. Instead, they settle in one place. "Come," they say, "let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves." Instead of glorifying God and following his plan, they decide to build a massive monument to themselves. Time and again, people stop following God's plan and think they know better. The consequence of this, we read, "The Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them all over the face of the earth." Now at Pentecost, we read that the scattered people are brought together, and again, they're able to understand each other, but this time not in their own power and strength, but through the power of the Holy Spirit. People had been scattered, exiled, driven out. This coming together is a sign that God's plan to draw people to himself has been completed. His plan has worked. God's plan ultimately is not to divide people, rather to draw all people to him, to unite them and restore his kingdom. Next we read, "Some, however, made fun of them and said, 'They've had too much wine.'" I must admit, I've always found that verse quite funny, but I feel there is a valuable point in there. We know that they weren't drunk, rather indwelt, filled with the Holy Spirit. I hesitate to use the word intoxicated, but they were under the influence of the Holy Spirit. Now, the joy that comes when people drink wine comes from its suppressing effect. It suppresses your inhibitions and reduces your perception of reality. The effect of the Holy Spirit can clearly look the same to onlookers, but it is very different. Rather than suppressing reality, the disciples became more aware of the truth than they'd ever been. The influence of the Holy Spirit brings joy from truth and a fuller awareness of your restored identity as a child of God. When we seek the presence of the Holy Spirit, it's not to take us away from our present reality, but rather to fully reveal it. I'll say that again. When we seek the presence of the Holy Spirit, it's not to take us away from our present reality, but rather to fully reveal it. Now, We must also remember that the Holy Spirit isn't just some new character turning up as a surprise twist. He's always been present since the beginning. Genesis opens with, "The Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." And throughout the whole of the Old Testament, there are times when the Holy Spirit came to people, to Joshua, to Gideon, to Samson, to Saul, to David, and to others. But when he does, it's to empower them for a task, for a limited time. David in Psalm 51 is aware of this. He pleads, "Create in me a pure heart, O God. Renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me." He was aware that the level of intimacy was not yet permanent. God's people were aware of his presence, but they knew there was a separation. God chose to dwell within the tabernacle or the temple. Now, we're used to saying that Jesus was fully God and fully man, quite a mystery. The personality and character of God wrapped up in human flesh, limited to the abilities of a human body. So his ability to perform miracles comes from the fact that he was filled with the Holy Spirit. Emmanuel, God with us. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove, alighting on him, and a voice from heaven saying, "This is my Son whom I love. With him I'm well pleased." He is our blueprint of how a human can live fully in line with God's plan, filled with and empowered by the Holy Spirit. We looked last week at the ascension of Jesus. Before he left them, we read in John chapter 14 that Jesus said, "If you love me, keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. Anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and I'll come to them, and will make our home with them. All this I've spoken while still with you, but the advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things, and will remind you of everything I have said to you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I don't give you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." What are Jesus' teachings? Well, we've spent 15 months looking at Matthew, so we should have a good idea, but here's Jesus' own summary. In Matthew 22, he says this, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbour as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments." So, the Holy Spirit has always been present, and at times he came to people throughout the Old Testament. The Holy Spirit indwelt Jesus himself, showing us what it looks like to live when a human lives in line with God's plan, empowered by the Spirit. Jesus promises that anyone who loves him will be sent the Holy Spirit. God will make his home with us. God will make his home with us. Do you love Jesus? Do you try to follow his teachings? Anyone who calls himself a follower of Christ should have the confidence that the Holy Spirit lives within them. Whatever level of understanding we may have, Jesus says this, "Anyone who loves me and obeys my teaching, my Father will love them, and will come to them and make our home with them." You are filled with the Holy Spirit. So what next? Those first believers began to live radically different lives. This behaviour was infectious, and believers were added to their number daily. They began to truly live. They realised what Jesus had meant when he said, "I've come so they may have life and have it to the full." But to accept that the Holy Spirit lives inside of us is an amazing revelation. This is what it means to be fully human, back to the original plan. We were made to live like this. God is no longer distant. He has made his home with us, not just as the person of Jesus, but through the indwelling of our hearts, through the Holy Spirit, God with us. Where there was separation, the Spirit brings unity. Not just about gathering people physically together, but we are united for we're all filled with one Spirit. When the Holy Spirit fills us, when we allow him to work within us, we are influenced, not like with wine, suppressing reality, but with a new realization of the truth, living life to the full.
We believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who proceeds from the Father and the Son, our God, the three in one. The Spirit who was there hovering over the deep as time began, the one who brought into being this master plan, Creator, that's who you are. The one who guides by cloud, by fire, the one who would inspire the artistry and design of the very place in which he would inhabit. The one who leads the way, who gives courage and strength for each and every day. Still, when the journey is long, he gives rest. Where can I go from your Spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? In the power of the Spirit, Jesus endured his death on the cross. You see, through the cross we have the Holy Spirit living in us. He's alive in us, abides in us. Oh Spirit, be my guide. I trust that you have made a way. When that curtain was torn, we could finally enter into your presence, the place where you dwelt. But do you not know that you yourselves are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst? Jesus said, whoever is thirsty, come to me and drink. Streams of living water will flow out of whoever believes. By that he meant the Spirit which they were later to receive. So they waited patiently 2,000 years ago in that upper room. They waited and lingered, then the Spirit blew. It fell on them like fire, set their tongues ablaze. People gathered round them, utterly amazed. Are they drunk, they asked? No, Peter remarked. You see, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. So let us worship him now, the one who broke off our chains. He's the miracle worker, the comforter, the one who sustains, the one who breathed the very scripture we read. He's the one revealing Christ to us, the one who abides in us. He's here right now, here in our midst. We believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, and with the Father and the Son he is worshipped and glorified.